74 South Africans killed in the Nigeria church collapse have finally arrived in South Africa just over 2 months after the incident. The focus now shifts to the 74 families who must now make final arrangements to bury the remains of their loved ones and then bring closure to this long and painful experience. 26 other South Africans injured were repatriated a month ago. 20 of them had since been discharged from hospitals and reunited with their families. For the other 11 families, it's still a long and agonizing wait as the remaining bodies still have to go through the process of identification. A total of 116 people died on September 12 when the guest house belonging to the Synagogue Church of All Nations in Lagos, headed by preacher TB Joshua, collapsed. The tragedy will remain in the minds of South Africans for a lifetime, as there are still many questions that need to be answered. Well, we are joined in studio today by the South African spokesperson of the Synagogue Church of All Nations, Mr. Kirsten Nemathandani. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you once again for joining us.
Good morning to you and to your viewers out there.
I want to ask you first up, so just the process that you guys as the church and the families will now be going through, move on until the deceased are laid to rest, and if you can maybe tell us what role the church will play in all of this.
Thank you very much once again. I think it's befitting at this point in time on behalf of Emmanuel TV partners and of course the Synagogue Church of All Nations and the man of God himself to express our deepest message of sympathies and condolences to the bereaved families. And we want to say to them, the man of God had made a very serious commitment to say he is going to walk this difficult road with them up to the end of it. And as we talk now, obviously, with the remains of the others who haven't come back, the commitment is he is going to be out there 24/7 to ensure that that process is fast-tracked up to the end. And of course, government also made a very serious commitment, which we should really appreciate, that we have a caring government. You just asked as to what then from now. I must say at this point in time, the Synagogue Church of All Nations has dispatched teams throughout the country to go once again to continue to give spiritual support, emotional support, console families. As you understand at this point in time, this is now again that difficult time to really come to face with reality when their loved ones are back home. And I must also indicate that thanks to the various provincial governments that are playing such a major role, we were informed already that 3 memorial services were held in KZN, Polokwane, Limpopo, and of course, if my memory serves me well, that also include Mpumalanga. That tells that indeed this has been a disaster for this country, a country in mourning and working together. And we want to appreciate this great support from the nation that is saying this belongs to us and we are going to be out there to support the families. The church continues to be on the ground, and in most cases, they are part of the funeral ceremonies that are taking place and giving the continuous spiritual support.
I want to ask you a question that our viewers have been asking us on social media, and a question that's been asked by many others. A month ago, TB Joshua failed to appear before an inquest to answer questions about the tragedy in Nigeria. He's not made an appearance with the repatriation of bodies to South Africa. When are we going to see TB Joshua coming to South Africa?
Thank you very much for that question. I think this is one question that we need to put record straight. The man of God did not appear for the inquest because he was not subpoenaed. In terms of the Nigerian laws, you have to personally receive that subpoena. And as always, he's been a humble servant of the Lord and of course a servant of government because he works with the people. As you know, church will always be submissive to the ruling government. And once subpoenaed, he'll be out there. The question of saying when will he be, why was he not here? As you know, he's the chief mourner. Not only South Africans passed on in that stage. So the entire bodies belonging to various countries were out there. Surely it would have resulted with misunderstanding with other countries. Why did he go to this country, not that country? It's a principle of first things first. Surely after the burial, the man of God has indicated that he'll be out there to meet families because he believes a relationship has been built between the church and those families.
Will he then at some point visit the countries of the bereaved, including South Africa?
Definitely, that's a very serious commitment. In fact, we understand that there are even plans afoot to ensure that on a monthly basis, he may be in this country to give continuously support those families. And not only those families, and many other churchgoers will then have an opportunity of really meeting the man of God. Look, he continues to send his love and compassion to the various families. And he has made it very clear, this is on top of his agenda, nothing else. He prays day and night to ensure that this should come to an end.
You're talking about the families and you're talking about assistance during this time of bereavement that they're suffering. We also hear reports of financial contributions having been made to the families of the deceased. Can you give us an idea what kind of financial assistance the church have been giving to the families of or the bereaved families rather?
Certainly, from the word go, immediately this incident happened, the teams were sent down from Lagos to go and meet families, did the need analysis in terms of various families. As you know, some families lost their breadwinners. In such cases, obviously the support would be different in the sense that life had to continue. The key issue here is life should never be worse off than they were before. In some cases, issues of school fees and, of course, fees at varsities, rental, etc., whatever the family would put in as a need, the men of God had made sure that those needs are met because it was critical that their life continue as expected.
We are now a little bit over 2 months on from the tragedy. Has the church changed its position on how this tragedy occurred? And if I may ask, what is the official position right now of the church with regards to what caused this horrible tragedy?
Look, from the onset, the church's official position is that was a controlled demolition. The fortunate part of it is there's an inquest going on, and obviously the truth will then come out from that process, and all of us will begin to know the reality. The fact is that structure came down within seconds, and it can never happen if it's a structural defect.
Let's move on to those bodies of South Africans that's still in Nigeria. Can you give us the reasoning why I think it's about 11 bodies that have not been returned. Can you give us a reason why they're still there and also maybe an update on when they're expected to return home?
Thank you very much. Once again, this is a time that we should thank our government, in particular the president, for having sent a team out there under Minister Hadebe to fast-track the process. This is a process whereby our government had certainly gone in and really meet the Nigerian counterpart to say, please fast-track this process. The understanding is this has to do with clear identification. You've got to understand that the Nigerian authorities have their way of running the identification, most probably different from ours. And that is the only thing that is holding back the remains of our loved ones. And we trust that with government's commitment, we had the Deputy President saying they are not going to rest until that is done. And the same applies to the man of God. He said he is not going to sleep, neither to rest until that is done. And that is happening.
Tell us about the effect that this tragedy has had on the day-to-day operations of the Synagogue Church of All Nations.
Look, I think the effect was clear in the sense that the focus from the men of God and for all the evangelists there was families first, meaning the focus had to shift in supporting the families. The prayers and energies were focused on doing that because those lives remained very, very important for them. Of course, the church continues every Sunday because that was very essential to try and ensure that, you know, God's divine powers continue to give strength to those families. But very interesting, as we are talking now, there are so many people wanting to go back out there. We just heard that over 8,000 have been inquiring as to how could we go back. In fact, including those survivors, they're anxiously waiting to go out there, but the understanding is first things first. Let's go past this process so that when we have gone past it, we are able to continue with our lives. And of course, this tragedy will be a tragedy that will never be forgotten in the church's understanding. Those that passed on as the martyrs in the kingdom of God. And we want to say to the family, if they could find solace in that understanding that the loved ones passed in the house of the Lord.
I thank you for joining us today. That's the South African spokesperson of the Synagogue Church of All Nations, Mr. Kirsten Nemathandani, joining us live here today on Newsroom. Thank you once again for joining us. Let's have a look.